The Mission Impossible movies have finally come to an end with Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. And it's been a great wild ride. Mission Impossible is easily one of the best action franchises out there. And even the worst entry in this list is easily better than most action movies out there. So here it is, my top 8 Mission Impossible films. Coming in at number 8 is probably very obvious, but it is Mission Impossible 2. This one is an incredibly weird entry because it is just totally very different from all the other entries in the franchise. It has this over-the-top stylistic slow-mo, the doves, a pretty fun and entertaining motorcycle sequence, this which is expected of director John Woo, who is a very top-tier action director. Unfortunately, narratively speaking, the movie is incredibly underwhelming. The story is uninteresting, the romance is incredibly weak, the villain is lackluster, the spy espionage element is pretty stupid. There is some fun to be had, but it's easily the weakest entry. At number 7 is the latest and supposedly final entry, The Final Reckoning. The reason for this being placed so low is unfortunately the poorly paced first half of this movie. It is such an incredibly exposition heavy first act that is filled with so many callbacks and flashbacks. It doesn't help that the plot is bordering on nonsensical with how ridiculous the stakes are and how they turned Ethan from this simply badass agent from all the previous movies into this sort of messiah superhero, chosen one for the final entry. Gabriel and the Entity return from the previous film and unfortunately have awful payoff. They are both incredibly disappointing. It's painful in Gabriel's case, as he was built up as a villain with a past connection with Ethan. However, this is never explored for some reason, so we have no idea what his deal was. The movie also introduces more new characters, which unfortunately results in the existing characters getting less to do. Doesn't help that the first half is a bit lacking in big set pieces. Still, the second half of this film is incredibly strong and is exactly what Mission Impossible should be. Incredibly tense and anxiety-inducing submarine section, and a top-tier plane sequence that is wonderfully gripping and exciting. The Final Reckoning definitely delivers on the set pieces, but it does leave a lot to desire, writing-wise. And for what is meant to be a finale, it's just okay. At number 6 is J.J. Abrams' Mission Impossible 3. After the weird second entry by John Woo, the third movie felt like it brought the franchise back from near death. What I really love about this entry is that it felt like the first movie to really make Ethan human. We get to see more of his personal life and what he is like as a person when he is not on mission. It also easily has one of the most menacing villains in the franchise ever, with Owen Davian played phenomenally by Philip Seymour Hoffman. Ethan always feels relatively in control in most of the franchise, but in this entry, felt like the first villain that was truly testing him as a character. He also has an actual decent supporting cast with also the introduction of one of the eventual best supporting characters ever, in Benji, played by Simon Pegg. The action scenes are also pretty fun, creative, and intense, like the bridge sequence and the Shanghai roof spire. Unfortunately, what brings the action down is the trends of the time. For example, overly quick edits and shaky cam. The final act is also a bit underwhelming, and I wasn't a big fan of how Owen is taken down. Still, an underrated entry in the series.
This tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds.
At number 5 is the first Mission Impossible film by Brian De Palma. This one's an interesting entry as it is more grounded and more serious than the wild, bombastic entries after. It isn't an all-out action movie, and is instead a full-on spy espionage thriller story instead. It is incredibly tense, and it does have an entertaining climactic action set piece. It also easily has one of the most iconic scenes in cinema history with the rope repelling boat sequence. It has excellent direction, editing, and visuals which set it apart from the other entries. What does bring this entry down, though, is the supporting characters. They aren't as fleshed out and the villain's motive feels incredibly shallow and weak. The twists are also pretty predictable as well. At number 4 is Dead Reckoning. Dead Reckoning is interesting because of having an AI as a villain. It is a little weird, but considering how Ethan always outsmarts the human villains, an AI sort of makes sense. I do like the introduction of the new character Grace, played by Hayley Atwell. I appreciate that she isn't an agent like Ilsa. She's an amazing thief that adds a bit of chaos to everything while not being truly loyal to the hero or the villain's cause. Grace is not accustomed to the shenanigans of the IMF, so she adds an interesting POV to what is going on in the plot. There is also great chemistry between Tom Cruise and Hayley Atwell, which makes their scenes together really enjoyable. Henry returns as Kittredge from the first Mission Impossible as well, and he is still as great as he was in that film. The weird rivalry and antagonism between his character and Ethan is fun to watch. The action set pieces continue to be great. The airport scene is incredibly tense with how many groups trying to mess or hunt the IMF. The Rome car chase is a thrilling 20 minutes of pure adrenaline and comedic joy. The third act with the train is an awesome, stellar, and gripping delight to watch. Also, the motorcycle off the cliff that was in all the posters was exceptional. Lorne Balfe also returns to score the movie, and he just delivers again. His score makes every action scene more impactful, and the emotional stuff hit harder. What drags this movie down for me is simply the underwhelming human villains. It was great to have villains that aren't agents going evil or arms dealers like in the past films, but it just doesn't work. Gabrielle, despite having this connection to Ethan in the past to become a more personal villain, he just feels very underdeveloped. He isn't even involved in the film that much until halfway through, and by that point, he's mostly just a goon for the AI entity. Paris, played by Pom, is feels just like a James Bond henchman. There's just not much else to her. The script is also incredibly weak. There are just so many times when the dialogue is just characters mentioning the key all the time. Seriously, take a shot every time the key is mentioned in this movie. I wish they just cut back on this repetition or rephrase some of these dialogues. On that note, this being a part 1 does result in a non-complete story, which is insane considering how this movie is near 3 hours. At number 3 is Rogue Nation. This is the first ever entry to be directed by Christopher McQuarrie, who then proceeded to direct every entry afterwards. Rogue Nation starts off incredibly strong by introducing an evil organization in the Syndicate. They rival the IMF, which is so cool. Solomon Lane, played phenomenally by Sean Harris, is easily my second favorite villain to come out of this franchise. I just love how he manages to challenge Ethan as a character by simply besting him throughout the film. It also introduces one of the best female characters in the franchise with Ilsa, who is played terrifically by Rebecca Ferguson. I love the plotline of her being undercover in the Syndicate and how she is challenged because she doesn't want to kill innocents, yet has to not compromise on her mission. Seeing her struggle internally with not wanting to kill Ethan for the mission is compelling stuff. I also like the mystery element as well, trying to figure out what the Syndicate plan is and how were they created. I also enjoyed the fun pairing of Jeremy Renner and Ving Rhames. Rogue Nation also has an awesome intro with Ethan hanging on the plane, an awesome as hell motorcycle scene, and a stellar opera sequence. Heck, Tom Cruise holds his breath underwater for 6 minutes. If there is a weird nitpick I have, I wish the movie ended on a big set piece, instead of beginning with the biggest one. Still, this is a near perfect entry, yet it is only 3 on my list. That just goes to show how amazing this franchise is. At number 2 is Ghost Protocol. Ghost Protocol is the only entry to ever be directed by Brad Bird, and boy is it good. This entry is the one that finally found the identity of what Mission Impossible films should be. Every entry afterwards would basically follow the golden standards set by Ghost Protocol. This entry has the best focused IMF team. Every supporting character has a role and even a proper story arc. Jane, played by Paula Patton, has a personal stake in the story, as her love is gunned down during a mission. She has to set her feelings aside despite massively wanting revenge, but she can't compromise on her mission. This entry also introduces Jeremy Renner, who is incredibly charismatic and funny. Love the mystery element behind his character, as he is clearly incredibly skilled, but we don't know his past, so we don't know what he is hiding. The entry also makes a great change to a Mission Impossible 3 character in reintroducing Benji, played by Simon Pegg. Love that he is no longer simply the tech guy, but now is an agent on the team. He is easily the best supporting character, and there is an obvious reason why he continues to be in every entry afterwards. One thing that Brad Bird has over Christopher, in my opinion, is that there's definitely more style, interesting direction, and incredibly great shots compared to the rather generic looking shots that Christopher does. The action scenes are exhilarating and fast paced, but the story continues to amp up in tension to the point that you're constantly on the edge of your seat. It is also the entry that actually utilizes a lot of fun gadgets that are not simply the face mask you always see. The perspective shifting screen when they were infiltrating the Kremlin, the contact lens copier, the climbing gaffs. I really wish future entries used more gadget like Ghost Protocol, but sadly, they didn't really do that much afterwards. On that note, this entry has easily one of the best action set pieces ever with the Burj Khalifa scene that I don't think has ever been topped in this franchise. What brings this entry down and makes it not number one is simply the underwhelming villains. They're not awful, but they're not amazing either. There isn't much depth or exploration of them. There's also a little twist at the end of this movie that kind of undermines one character's arc, but it ain't too movie breaking. Still, a phenomenal movie, but it is just topped by one entry. At number one is Mission Impossible Fallout. This isn't just the best Mission Impossible film, it is one of the best action movies ever, period. Fallout is unique as well, as it is the first movie that is a straight up sequel. Mission Impossible 1 to Ghost Protocol are all rather standalone stories and can all be watched individually without having to watch previous entries. Fallout is not the case and definitely requires Rogue Nation, as the story builds upon the elements that were explored in that film. Ethan's refusal to compromise on his belief end up being tested as his refusal to abandon his team lead to a potential global nuclear disaster. It also brings up the question of how he lost his potential happy life with his wife from Mission Impossible 3 because he couldn't give up on his ideals. This entry also introduces another great character in Walker, played by Henry Cavill. He plays a great counterpart to Ethan, as Walker is more ruthless and willing to do whatever it takes for the mission. Angela Bassett and Vanessa Kirby joined the franchise, and they are both great additions, even in their small screen time. It also reintroduces Solomon Lane, and he continues to be menacing, even as a side villain. The team brings back Ilsa, Benji, and Luther, and they continue to be amazing supporting characters. Sadly, Jeremy Renner doesn't return though. In my opinion, Fallout also easily has the best ever soundtrack, and this is why Lorne Balfe is the GOAT. It also has some of the best action set pieces in the franchise, and it isn't just one, it is multiple best action set pieces. The bathroom fight scene with Tom and Henry was amazing with some of the best choreographed fights ever. The Halo dive was shot phenomenally. The motorcycle chase sequence was much more tense compared to the previous one in Rogue Nation, and the helicopter scene in the climax is easily one of the best third acts in the franchise. It also has one of the best Tom Cruise run in the franchise, to the point that Tom actually broke his ankle. The movie is also paced so well, and the action is sprinkled perfectly throughout that you are never ever bored or feel the movie's drag. This is easily the best Mission Impossible. And that is my ranking of the best Mission Impossible films. Do you agree with my ranking? If you don't, please comment down what your ranking of the Mission Impossible films are. And thank you for watching.